Hi everyone, Robert Farrer here, or at least his hands. I've been wanting to talk about the court cards for a while now. I did quite a lot of research on them when I was writing my book. And something that struck me was that I felt less comfortable reading the court cards than with the other cards in the tarot deck. And this has been at the back of my mind for many years, but I'd never really sorted it out. Writing the book forced me to sort my ideas out on the court cards. And when I began to read various books about the court cards, some sort of special books, I realized that actually there is no real consensus about the meanings of the court cards. There's some consensus about some aspects of them. But if you flick through the pack, I'm talking about Rider-Waite-Smith here. Look at a card like Wheel of Fortune. Well, there's a certain amount of consensus about that. And even people who have no experience of tarot cards, who turn up for a reading, they see that on the table and it means something to them. There's a nice story, I think, told by Marcus Katz when he gave a tarot reading to a very skeptical person, and he really didn't know how to get through to this guy, and he put the cards down, and one of them was Three of Swords, and this guy just burst into tears. He knew nothing about tarot, but he saw that image of the three swords going through the heart, and that very much spoke to him about where he was at that moment. So yes, some people agree about some aspects of the court cards, but really it is the case that there is no general agreement about what they mean and how to read them. And I'm actually being quite mild here, because if you read books about the court cards, you will really open up a ball of confusion, and people completely contradicting each other. Now, some teachers and writers suggest that the best thing to do is just to decide for ourselves what we feel these cards mean, to look at these people and to just be intuitive about it, and then make notes and in a sense form our own set of meanings for these cards. I actually disagree with that. I think that if you're going to do that, then you might as well just invent your own set of oracle cards. If we're using tarot cards, something that's very fascinating about them is that they go back a long way, and they do connect with old traditions and old stories, and that's interesting. And I will be talking about that in my court cards videos. So I'm not laying down the law. I am just sharing with you some research that I've done, some thoughts that I've had, and how I now view these cards in readings and how it helps me. Sometimes I'll be giving a fair amount of detail, but of course when you see a court card in a reading, it often just means there's someone involved, who may or may not be helpful or hostile. Okay, let's go. First up, the King of Wands or Batons. Now clearly this is a very fiery card. We have lions and salamanders. We have a salamander here, which is just on the edge of this particular deck here. So here we have Leo, Aries, Sagittarius. Well, he or she, but when I'm looking at these cards, I will tend to use the gender of the illustration. He is thought of as a leader. Now, the traditional association of the King of Wands. And these associations go back pre-tarot. They go back to the original pack of playing cards, which is a little bit older than the tarot. And the original association of this figure is Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was a leader, and he's clearly a bit of an egoist, I suppose you could say. The fire energy is expressed through ego, as it is, I would say, in the sign of Leo. A person like this is quite charismatic and attracts followers. And these people can be good to learn from and follow up to a point. It's important with King of Wands types that you do not lose yourself in following them or learning from them. Imagine a person with drive, ambition, someone dynamic, an empire builder, if you like, charismatic, not always popular. There's a lovely tarotist called Yolanda Robinson, who I read quite a lot of when I was researching the court cards. And she says something rather nice about the King of Wands, and I'll just quote from her. She connects the King of Wands to the Kundalini energy, and she comments, "We sense at some level a friction between the use of this energy to satisfy our senses or to nourish our spiritual nature." Okay, so she points out the way this energy can go in one way or another. Next up, the King of Cups. The fact that these kings are on thrones, and just to reiterate, these kings can apply to men or women. The throne seems to symbolize being in a position that works for you, a position of strength, in a sense being where you need to be, where you are fulfilling yourself and where you are in your power. I think of all the kings, the King of Wands is maybe the one who's moving the most, who's most dynamic. The other three, I think, have achieved their position of power. Now, this king, his throne is on the waters. So the water, I think, is the unconscious. And this king he can handle unconscious material. For me, that suggests an artist, but it could be anyone dealing with psychological aspects or anybody who has that particular kind of mastery over the unconscious or maybe the emotional content of life. Now, he's actually in the middle of the ocean here. He's not connected to land. So King of Cups can sometimes be a bit distant. He can be difficult to get through to. You might be interested to know that he is traditionally associated with, let me see, Charlemagne. Because he's made his peace, if you like, with the emotional realm. He's pretty calm. He might be a powerful person, but he doesn't cause a scene, does he? He's quite modest. He's probably quite temperate. He's probably got his ego under control, I think. Now, there's a very nice tarotist called Anthony Louis. He's a psychiatrist, and he talks about the court cards in sort of Jungian terms. And I'll tell you what he says about the King of Cups. He says he's the least inflexible of the four kings. He's sensitive, imaginative, spiritual, and obliging, also tending towards the passive. Okay, so that's King of Cups. Now we have King of Swords, I think maybe also King of Pentacles. These are the two kings that are really facing us head on. So there's a kind of feeling of what you see is what you get. They're giving us their full attention. I mean, the first two kings, First two kings are slightly looking left and right, aren't they? So they're kind of in their own worlds. These two are full on. And I think especially the King of Swords. Swords is a tricky suit, and I think the other three members of this family are quite tricky. But I don't find the King of Swords tricky. For me, he's quite an Aquarian character. He's light. He reminds us of the Emperor, but it's a different kind of thing, isn't it? The Emperor has a very heavy throne with Aries all over it. But the King of Swords has a light, sort of modernistic, stripped-down throne, and it has butterflies on it. And it has clouds in the background. And if I was going to go to a more traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, there are birds flying around. So it's got quite an he has quite an airy feel. So traditionally he's associated with King David in the Bible. And I think sort of maybe by sort of osmosis process, he's also seems to be a bit like King Solomon. He's the wise judge. So this is a king, someone in a position of power who's not conservative. He has Aquarian qualities, so that's forward-looking. He's interested in the new, modernity. He uses his mind to decide between one option and the other, to decide between right and wrong. He is balanced in the way that Libra is balanced. He's communicative in the way that Gemini is. For me, the King of Swords is someone with a clear head. He's not over-cerebral, but he can use his mind, and that's very valuable. So it might even symbolize clear-headedness when it comes into reading this card. I'm going to finish off with King of Pentacles. I love the Pentacles family. I think they're really good value. This is one of my favourite cards, traditionally associated with Alexander the Great, who was another conqueror, but he was known for his generosity. So King of Pentacles, he has resources, but he's very generous with them. He doesn't hoard it all for himself. We see Taurus all over the place. So very strong connection to the ground. We see grapes. I see the King of Pentacles as a helper, someone who can connect you to resources. There are some tarotists who say that, the King of Pentacles is not particularly interested in love. I think that's a bit unfair. I think any court card that appears in a reading could be interested in love. But there is maybe something that we could take away from this, a way of reading this card, if you like. If the querent was asking specifically about a love question, and there were various figures cropping up as possibilities in the querent's future, the King of Pentacles could represent the temptation to marry for security. I won't say marry for money, because that's a bit judgmental. A lot of us, maybe all of us, marry for some kind of security. But that seems to be an emphasis that this card suggests if it comes up in a love reading. But yes, another very strong character here. This character, like all Taurians, this character, he loves beauty and elegance and so forth. But you can see underneath the robe, there is also armor. So there is a strength and a sort of a steel fist in the velvet glove, if you like. Well, ladies and gentlemen, those are my 4 kings. And I will be back eventually to give you 4 queens, 4 knights, and 4 pages. Bye.